All right. Can I get a test from you?
Test it 1 2 3 4 5. 1 2 3 4 5. Test 1 2 3 4 5.
That is absolutely perfect.
Okay.
And you know, I was just telling you we're here instead of in the studio now.
That's
But
right.
some things don't change, man. You got to tell me a joke.
So you want a joke? Let
I
me think.
gotta have a joke.
Let me think of something. So April showers bring May flowers. What does a Mayflower bring?
Oh, what?
Pilgrims.
Now let me ask you a question. If someone from Holland marries a Filipino, what kind of child do they produce?
A jalapeno?
Yes. Mr. Superintendent, first I want to thank you for coming back to the podcast. You are always so gracious. And I wanted to get you here to talk about two things, maybe three. First thing I want to start with is there is a lot going on out here, man, in these streets.
Yeah, you're right about that.
And I would love to know as we ramp up and get ready for the new school year in a couple of weeks. Number one, I love your input because some of these children, if not are, should be in our school system.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, has the system prepared, gone above and beyond as it relates to the safety of our children for this upcoming school year?
So you're right. There are a lot of things that are happening in the community. I tell the teachers that work with our students all the time that many of our students come from environments that you could not imagine on your worst day. And for some of our students, that's their every day.
Yeah.
Here in Birmingham City Schools, we have lost over 20 students over the last 3 years to gun violence. And that doesn't count the number of students who have been shot that didn't pass away. So the problem is real, but it's a community problem. And so we in the school district, we have an obligation because we are part of the community. I think first and foremost, it is about, and when we talk about safety measures, we'll talk a little bit about that. I won't go too deep into that because you don't want to let anybody know what processes and procedures you have in place to address certain things. But I can talk to you about what some of the things that we've implemented. So I would say this first and foremost, you have to build relationships with students because you can put as many metal detectors in place as you want to. But as we saw this past weekend with the president, somebody who is determined to do something, they're going to try to do it. And so what you have to do is try to deal with that determined person. And so we wrote a grant through our social and emotional learning department, through our PBI's department. It's a national grant. It was $1 million grant around community safety. So it's about teaching children how to make better choices and better decisions. Because typically what you find is that it takes a split second of anger, it takes a split second of bravado, and you have changed your life forever, and you've changed the life of your victim and their families forever. So if you can slow down that thinking process and allow kids to make better choices, then they will. There's a program that we have with the city. It's called it's through Judge Sparks program. It is. It's called. My mind just went blank.
It's the one you gave me the T-shirt.
That's
with.
exactly right. That's exactly right. Common Ground. That's what it's called. Common Ground. And so what Common Ground does is it brings mentors in to work with the young men and this year's young ladies. We're doing it district wide to talk about how do you process when you get angry? How do you process making decisions, and in particular making a decision that may be detrimental to you, your family, and the family of some potential victim. So that is the biggest piece, is changing attitudes and minds for students. But when you come into the schools, we have some layers of security. One of the things that I did when I became superintendent was that we had to ensure that many of our older buildings, and these are buildings that were built before Columbine, before people thought about school shootings, those buildings had, when you walked into the building, you had complete access to the entire building. So we built like storefronts in those buildings so that you have what we call a security bubble. So when you walk into the building, you have another layer before you go into the main building. Most of those force you into the office rather than allowing you to walk directly into the school. And so we did that. We invested in putting those in all of our schools. We upgraded our metal detectors. So we don't have what they call metal detectors. These are weapons detectors. So the metal detectors will detect any metal that you have in your pocket, right? So you could have, like when you go into the courthouse, you could have your keys and the collars to go off.
Mm-hmm.
But these weapons detectors are like you see at concerts or you see at Disney World. It allows you to have hundreds of people to walk through, and it only stops the person, because it uses AI to only stops the person and that gun could be behind your back, the knife could be in your pocket. It is able to detect that. And
so it's looking for shapes and
yes,
stuff like that.
Shapes. It looks for shapes, and it also looks for density too. So a gun has a certain, it's not going to be a thin piece of metal.
Right.
So we have that in our high schools. We also have, and some of our middle schools, and we're expanding that across the district. But we have the traditional metal detectors and wands in all of our schools. We also hired a company called Lane Federal that provides security for our schools. So what we used to have teachers who would do morning duty, and then they would wand kids, they would man the metal detectors, they would check backpacks and all of that. So instead of that, we have a contract with a company called Lane Federal, where if you go into our schools, you'll see people dressed in black shirts and black pants, and those are our security officers that we have hired through a contracted service. Even beyond that, when you go into the schools, you have what we call a Raptor system. So what Raptor does is when you go in and you want to check your child out, or you say, I want to come in, I want to, for some reason, with the Raptor system, it scans your driver's license. And if you have a warrant, if you are a pedophile, it comes up. And so
really,
we're able to identify if this is somebody who doesn't need to be in the school. And so when you go in, it prints you out a little badge, but it also keeps a record of your license. So when you come back, you don't have to keep scanning. It can print it up. They just put your name in. So we have
like if I'm a bad guy and like my record come up, do y'all call the police and say like it's somebody with a record?
Well, we have. I mean,
with a warrant.
It's tied to somebody who does something for. Like if you have a marijuana charge when you were 18 years old, that's not going to be something that but if you have something involving children, or you're doing some felonies, things like that, then you don't need to be in a school. So we have that process as well. In addition, we're upgrading all of our camera systems this year. So we are putting, some of our schools had digital cameras, some of those schools had analog cameras. So we're bringing up all of our schools to have digital cameras in all of our schools. So really high resolution digital cameras so that we can see if something happens, we can see, get good video, get pictures of what happens in our schools. So not only are we upgrading the cameras, we're adding additional cameras in areas that we identified as being blind spots in the past. And then I don't know if you saw just last week, we did a drill at Woodlawn High School with the police and firefighters, and it was with our local security, our local school security, and it was an active shooter drill. And so we were able to identify areas that we need to work on, areas where we can better communicate with the police department, with the fire department. So if there's something that happens in one of our schools, then the police, the fire department, we've already drilled and practiced with that. And that's something that we're going to do on an annual basis. We started at Woodlawn, and we're doing it at all of our high schools to kind of get the bugs out, just in case, God forbid, anything happens. But we want to make sure that we are addressing anything that could possibly happen. But again, what I tell you, building relationships with kids is probably the most important thing that you can do, because children want to come to safe environments. Typically the school is a place that's a refuge from what they're seeing in the neighborhoods, and kids want to keep it that way. So if you are a principal or a counselor or a teacher that you have a good relationship with that child, they will tell you, I think he got some of this book bag,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as you know to keep that confidential, that the person who told you that confidential, and then address the issue that they have, that's how we find out most of the things that are happening in schools, because things happen in the neighborhoods and kids come back and let us know what's going on, because they want to have a safe learning environment.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think, security is so layered. And then you go into cybersecurity, because, a lot of school systems have been hacked. Even the city was hacked recently. And so, we really want to make sure that our kids, when they get on the internet, they're safe. We want to make sure that we have safeguards in place to keep phishing emails out of our system, to try to keep them from locking our system down. So it's so many layers tied to security. And I think, going back to my original point around supporting kids, the city of Birmingham provides $1 million for mental health supports for our students. We use that money to ensure that every school has a full-time counselor. So if a child is going through something, if a child feels like they are isolated, they feel bullied, they feel like they want to harm themselves, or harm others, we have somebody at every school that can provide that support. In the past, some schools had to share a counselor. So your counselor wasn't there on Monday and Tuesday, but they'll be there on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday.
Really?
Yeah, because some of our schools are smaller, and counseling units are given to schools based on population. So if you're a smaller school, you get what they call a 0.5 or half of a counselor, and another school gets a 0.5. So
that reminds me of like being at school on day one and stuff like that. If you're not there, you don't get the appropriations.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. So that's why it's important that right now we're in the middle of registration, right? So we're about 2 weeks away from the start of school.
And please expound on registration and what's coming up.
So I think a lot of parents are confused about the difference between enrollment and registration. So once you're enrolled in a school system, you're enrolled into that school system until you come and withdraw your child. But every year you have to register for school. And what registration, and it's a simple process. If you're in Birmingham City Schools, go to www.bhamcityschools.org, go to our registration page, and you can just update your information, because every year we need to have updated information in our system for your child. We need to know that your child is going to be coming back to the school, so that we have resources in place for your child when they show up for school. It's important for all students to be in school on day one. It is paramount for high school students to be there on day one. And let me tell you why. Because if you're not present on the first day of school, we have to go in and no-show all of those kids that are not present. So you didn't show up for school. And so we take you out of the system. And what does that mean? Now, if you're in elementary school, you come back because you're going to still be in Miss Johnson's classroom. Mm-hmm. But if you're in high school, you have a schedule, and if we take you out of the system, that deletes your schedule. So all those classes that you selected that you thought you might be in, you won't be in those classes, because we had to delete you because you didn't show up for school, right? Wow. And so somebody else who they've been on a waiting list, like I've been wanting to take French 2 or art, then I get put into that class. And then when you come to school, and a lot of times parents or students don't come in till like after the first week of school or the second week. Right. Well, by the time you come to school, you've already missed so much instruction, and then you may not necessarily get the classes that you want to get because we had to take you out of the system. That goes to our other issue, is around attendance. So if kids are not in school, and the reason why we no-show those children is because it shows them as being absent every day that they're not in school, right? Wow. And a lot of times parents don't know what it means to be a chronically absent student. So if I ask you, what do you think the definition of chronically absent is?
I would say somebody that goes to school half the time.
So half the times. So that means that if you're in school 180 days, you're saying half of that. If
like
you miss
90, 100 days. I'm there most of the time, but if I'm not there at least half the time, that's chronic.
So you say 90 days, if I'm not there, at least 90 days, it's chronic.
Right.
The actual definition is 18 days. So if you miss 10% of a school year, you're chronically absent. And parents don't really know that. And let me tell you what that means. That means if I'm in school and this is August, right? So the whole month of August. Say for instance, I missed 2 days, and it's excused or unexcused. I mean, you could have a flu and you're out. That's considered as chronically absent. Or you could be sitting at home watching Netflix.
Include this, like if I don't go the first days, does that count against?
So no, it doesn't. It only counts from the time that you start school. That's why it's important. That's why it's important for you to be on school the first day, because what it also does is it shortens what 10% is. So say for instance, a regular school day year is 180 days, right? So that's 18 days. If you miss 18 days, then you're chronically absent. But say you don't show up to school you miss the first 10 days of school. Your chronic absent number is 17 days because you've been registered for 170 days. So you only get 17 days to miss. So think about this. If I start school in August and the first 20 days, that's the first month of August, I missed 2 days in August. I am chronically absent for the month of August, and I've missed 2 days. Why? Because that's 10% of 20.
Yeah, 10%.
Yeah, 2 days is and I don't think parents know how close that threshold is. And a lot of times, parents or guardians, and when I say parents, I'm talking about grandparents, people who are taking care of children, because we know there are a lot of non-traditional families that we serve. So sometimes, parents will say, okay, we're going to be out. I know we're going to the family reunion for Thanksgiving, and you'll just miss this Friday. Well, if you miss that Friday, that's 1 day. And what if you got COVID? That's 5 days. Because remember, it's excused or unexcused. So you don't know if you're going to get sick. You don't know if you're going to have a death in your family. So you really need to save those days for true emergencies. And if you really, if there's a way that your child can come to school, please bring them to school.
How many of our kids are
chronically absent?
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, we were at 29% of the student body was chronically absent. So it's about a third. We got that number down to 25% last year. It looks like we're going to be up around 29% again this year. Because the threshold is so easy to get. And I think a lot of parents think, well, I sent an excuse in. Well, what the excuse does is excuse allows them to make up assignments while they were gone because they were out sick. It doesn't change whether you're chronically absent because it's excused or unexcused. So that's
important.
Yeah, it's very important. And so we really got to make sure parents know that threshold is a very thin threshold. Like you said, you thought it was half of the time. Only 18 days. That means you can only miss 2 days a month in a 9-month year. If you miss 2 days a month, you're chronically absent. Yeah.
Now, what's going
on? Was that a good explanation?
It really was.
Yeah.
It really was. And, let's circle back in a couple of weeks and remind people about, registration, attendance, the importance.
What I'm going to do this year is, so we got we do a lot of analytics in the school district, right? We one of the things that I believe in, and we get this from the Navy, you measure everything. So we measure everything. We have a contract with this company that tracks our attendance, right? And so we look for trends in attendance. And what our trends show us, it gives us green, yellow, and red boxes for each day of the year, right? And so what you see is in the month of August and September, you got a lot of greens, few reds, but a lot of greens. But as the year go on, you start seeing a lot of yellows and then reds. And what greens means that you have, good attendance across the district. Yellows, middle, and red, you got problems. So then you start noticing patterns. On Fridays, you see a lot of reds.
Right.
And the reds that you see on Fridays are typically high school students. So we need to make sure that we're addressing high school students coming on Friday. So how do we encourage those students to come to school on Friday? Do we put the test on Friday? Do we have an extra incentive on Friday? So we're looking at the analytics of that. And then the way our system is set up, it will call you every time your child misses a class, like in high school. Either miss first period, you miss second period, A student in your house missed third period. And then we used to have last year, after 3 days, our system automatically generates a letter to you. So what I said was after 2 days, because if you're chronically absent in 2 days in a month, then that letter should go home saying that your child has been chronically absent for the first month of school, right? And I think that will get parents to start thinking about what chronically absent is. And then we're looking with our communications department to really communicate that out to all parents, that the threshold is so small. And our schools are judged by that. You know, when you look at the A through F report card that you get, 15% of the report card for kindergarten through eighth grade is tied to attendance.
There's a lot of conversation about parenting and or the lack thereof. Do the parents get any kind of counseling or challenge when their kids aren't coming to school?
Well, let me say this. And like I told you earlier, we do a lot of digging into the data because I believe in making data-driven decisions and not decisions on what you might think or what you might feel, because what you might think and what you might feel may not necessarily be what the data is sharing with us. And so we peeled into why kids are absent, right? And I'll give you a couple of examples. So one example was that we had a large percentage of students at Hayes K-8, for example, who were missing school. And what we found was is that even though, the school was less than 2 miles from where the students live, on rainy days, the students didn't come to school. Because, you got a kindergartner, you may not feel comfortable with them walking to school in the rain. So we sent a bus, even though it was less than 2 miles, to bring those kids to school. Attendance went up. We also noticed that when we start pushing into the data, that a lot of students, I think it was around 1,700 students that we serviced, that had some level of experiencing homelessness, right? So if you're homeless and you're living in a car, or you're doubled up, or you're living in a weekly motel, maybe on this side of town, that side of town, this side of town, you also have transportation issues. So what we don't want to do is punish people for being poor, right? So if you're poor and you don't have a car, you may be homeless, you don't need to add to all of that the school system saying, I'm getting ready to take you to court because your child is missed school, right? What we should do is try to be part of the solution to support the family. So there's a program that we have, and we partner with Danny Carr with the DA's office. It's called Helping Families. What it does is, rather than looking at this in a punitive sense, let's look at it in a supportive sense. So what they've done is, kids oftentimes when they miss school, it's because I don't have clean clothes. I got one set of clothes that I wear for school. The washer may not be working. I may not have a washer. So we have washers in our schools, right? We also, Helping Families buys clothes for students, right? They also support families. They've even worked with parents around getting jobs, working out transportation issues. So it's taking away the barriers that parents have that may lead to chronic absenteeism, right? How do we support parents? It's changing the mindsets, moving away from looking at it as punitive and looking at it as, how can we support you? Because I've been in the school system 30 years, and I have never met, and you'd be surprised, I've never met a parent who did not want what was best for their child. Now, what that was and how they expressed it may have been different, but their core belief was, I want what's best for my child. Even if the parent is coming up and they're being irate, they are basically making a case in the language that they know for their children. And you got to respect that. And so how do we help parents? How do we not penalize people for poverty? And how do we help provide resources and supports for parents and students so that children will be able to come to school? And I think that the Helping Families program is one of those programs that, there's no amount of money that could really speak to how much support that they give children and families in Birmingham City Schools.
Before I let you go, in addition to the Birmingham City Schools always being gracious, Birmingham Promise and Ed Farm are sponsors of this podcast.
You got some good sponsors.
And I would love for you to talk about those partnerships.
So let's start with the Birmingham Promise. So Samantha Williams, who is the executive director of the Birmingham Promise, does an outstanding job. I mean, she was a huge find for the Promise to help move this work forward. They provide scholarships for 2 and 4 year colleges for students in Birmingham City Schools. But not only that, they provide internships for students starting in 11th grade, because oftentimes the students that we serve are first generation college students, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've never driven to Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
right, I can tell you about Atlanta, I can tell you what way to go, but you don't have a roadmap. Many children come from families that have already been to Atlanta. So I've got my college degree, so I'm telling my daughter, you need to do this, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Where's your FAFSA? Where's this? If you've not experienced that, you don't know the questions to ask. You don't know where to push in. So the Birmingham Promise bridges that gap for many of our students. There was a student a couple of years ago that graduated from Woodlawn High School, Destiny Miles. She participated in the early college program at Woodlawn, graduated with 60 hours of college credit, went to UAB with the support of Birmingham Promise. She graduated from college at age 19. She works over at Regions Bank. I mean, that's changing lives. That's one student. There was another student also from Woodlawn. She lost her mother and her father within a year of each other, right? And she had to be the adult with her younger sister, and she dropped out of school, right? And through our student success program, we allowed her to make up her credits because she could not go to school in a traditional way. She had to do online classes. So she got a high school diploma. And what she wanted to do was be a nurse's assistant, right? So where I says Destiny Miles went to a 4-year college, she wanted to go to Lawson for a 2-year college to get a certificate to be a nursing assistant.
Mm-hmm.
Birmingham Promise supported her in that. So they do work that, I mean, it's transformative, you know, and we know that, you know, education, and I'm not saying that everybody is going to go to college or that's the only path for everybody. But what I am saying is, if you look at the data, the more education you have, the more money you make and the more options you have. And if you come from environments where that's not a reality, you know, this can be a way that we can change generational poverty for a lot of our students.
And now what about Ed Farm?
I mean, Wayman Jackson over at Ed Farm. When the pandemic first started, we had 6,000 devices in Birmingham City Schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
6,000 devices. We had over 20,000 students. So the question was, how do we continue education in any kind of meaningful way when most school districts had devices, kids had devices at home? We did a survey and we found that 25% of our students either did not have a device or didn't have internet fast enough to run the programs that we had. So that first year of the pandemic, when the governor shut down schools, and I think it was March of 2020, we made copies, put big barrels of paper out with copies and sent them home to kids, and so that they can try in any way to provide a meaningful education. One of the things that I said was that, you know, never again will we get caught flat-footed like that. So the first round of ESSER money that we got, we bought $10 million worth of devices for every student and hotspots.
Wow.
But just having that and not having the training for our parents, not having the training for our teachers would not mean anything. That's where Ed Farm came in. Ed Farm came and trained all of our teachers on how to work in a digital environment. We would not have had meaningful education going into the 2021 school year when we were virtual most of the time if it were not for Ed Farm providing that support for our teachers, not to mention the spaces that they do for our students. Like, I don't know if you've been over to Southampton where they have this Ed Farm space over there, or to Bush Hill STEAM Academy, they have an Ed Farm space over there. We just opened up an Ed Farm space at Green Acres. And then we also have fellows in our schools that support technology because that's what going to be. It is the wave of the future, and our kids
Right.
are. We talk about millennials, but the children who are in school now are digital natives. We are not digital natives. When we grew up, iPads, phones, we didn't have those as children.
Right.
These kids, but the kids that we serve now, this is their life, this is their environment, and you can't go into a classroom and teach a traditional lesson when kids are used to seeing all this pops and wows on their devices. They're going to be bored out of their mind. So we have to use technology to help engage children, and Ed Farm is our partner to help us do that.
In closing, and I'm gonna I want you to expound on it maybe a little bit at a later date. But you guys are dropping an app.
Yeah. We got a new website. Well, we always had an app.
Okay.
But we upgraded our app, right? So if you go to our website, it's amazing. Our website is absolutely amazing. We heard our parents. We just finished our strategic planning process, and consistently we heard that we need to do a better job of communicating, right? And so that's why we got upgraded this app so that we can push information to parents. We upgraded our website. If you go to our website, I mean, it is our communications team, Cheryl Stewart, they did an amazing job of updating that app. And so it's nice. It's nice to see that we have top of the line technology in our classrooms, top of the line technology in Birmingham City Schools. We say Birmingham City Schools success starts here, and I think that we're seeing that happen. Not just with our website, not just with our app, not just with the work that we're doing with our partners, but we're seeing the payoff of that. We just had an article in Carnegie.org where we outlined how Birmingham City Schools is outperforming most urban districts when it comes to post-pandemic recovery. We were featured in the New York Times around that. We had a segment on the nightly news with Lester Hope. And
I saw that.
Yeah, we were featured in Forbes magazine, and then there's an article that should be coming out in the next couple of weeks with USA Today about Birmingham City Schools. I mean, I saw a few months ago, David Scher wrote an article that says something like, "Can Birmingham City Schools save Birmingham, the city of Birmingham?" And I think I would challenge that to say this, that there is success that's happening in Birmingham City Schools every day. We're building graduates that really are leaders for tomorrow. And I can just give you name after name after list after list. We have students and we have teachers who are at the top of their game. 2 years ago, the Alabama Teacher of the Year, right there at Washington K-8. This past year, a Milken Award winner. There's only one per state. Was a teacher right there at Phillips Academy. She got $25,000 for being the Birmingham City Schools teacher. The state of Alabama's Milken Award teacher. We have another school that we're getting ready to announce pretty soon that is going to be a blue ribbon school, the first blue ribbon school in Birmingham since 2014. So we are making strides in Birmingham City Schools. Success starts here. So I'm excited about the work that we're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Mr. Superintendent, and we'll see you again soon.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right.